Howdy freeze dryers, if you're watching this video, you more than likely have just purchased a Pro Model freeze dryer for the Harvestright, or you're curious to see what it's all about. Today we're gonna go over the setup of the new Pro Model. There's a few things that are different from old models, so if you are a new owner of the Pro Model, you may wanna watch this video all the way through. We're gonna talk about a few things that you need to do before, during, and after you open up all of the boxes. We're gonna go through all of the contents of all the boxes, how to install all of the components and everything, get you up and running, and we're gonna do a complete run from start to finish and get you comfortable with freeze drying. We're gonna do all of that coming up. So if you just purchased a freeze dryer, you're probably in a state of shock similar to what I was in about 6 years ago. You're just overwhelmed with information, and it's something that's just kind of totally new territory for you. But I want to assure you, you're in the right place. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've gained lots of knowledge in those years. So make sure you watch this video all the way through, and I'll make sure that we get you all the way through your first cycle of freeze drying, safe and sound, and with full confidence. But there's first a couple of things that you're gonna wanna do before you get up and running. Number one, make sure before you let the freight driver leave, make sure you don't see any noticeable things right away. Cut those bands off the outside, give it a quick once over before you sign the paper, before you let the driver leave. Hopefully that will save you some time. And number two, also make sure you get this up on a table or close to its final resting place, because you're not gonna wanna move this around. You need to let this sit for 24 hours until you run it for the first batch. So your shipment is gonna have two boxes. One is gonna have the freeze dryer in it. One is going to have everything else. We're gonna go over that in a second. Because I've done this quite a few times before, I'm going to imagine that most of the stuff is very similar inside of this package. This would be the box that sits on top of your shipment when you get it. This one's very important because it includes your pump, your accessories, and everything you need to put the freeze dryer together to get it up and running. I'm gonna go over the contents real quick. If you need a more thorough explanation of things, you can definitely go through my other videos or shoot me a comment in the comments section. You can see that I went with the Premier vacuum pump. I always do the oiled Premier. It's my favorite pump. It's what I've had on all of my freeze dryers. I have had oilless in the past, but in my opinion, I wouldn't waste the money. You won't hear people very often to tell you to go with the less expensive option, but that's what you're hearing from me today. Vacuum pump, you're also gonna get a filter. This is your oil filter, so you can reuse oil if you want to. It comes with an impulse sealer, which will seal your Mylar bags. And speaking of Mylar, they set you up with 50 bags and 50 oxygen absorbers. That'll get you a good start on freeze drying, and that way if you haven't purchased those already, you're ready to go even after your first batch. It's also gonna come with your stainless steel trays. It will come with some basic instruction manuals. I always recommend reading all of these thoroughly. There's great information in here. It'll answer a lot of the questions you have. And if your questions are not answered in these, you can join our Facebook or MeWe group. Those are our two social media groups. You can find those at Retired at 40's freeze drying group. And you can also use the search function with this magnifying glass like this. You can search threads and keywords and members and all kinds of different things. You may also want to consider buying the freeze drying handbook. This is a book that I wrote because there was just really not that great of information out there. This covers everything you can pretty much imagine in freeze drying from A to Z, and then a little bit more than that. This can be purchased at our store, freezedryingsupplies.com. You can also find it on Amazon. The last three things you're gonna find in here are going to be your drain hose, your vacuum hose, and your power cord. I'm gonna quickly show you how to put all of these together to get you up and running. After your 24 hours is up, just remove your rack and your seal on the front. Give all of that a good cleaning, and also clean the drum. A lot of people will use different kind of cleaners. I just use something that evaporates usually. Rubbing alcohol works really well. Some people use vodka. Some people use just good old soap and water, which is totally fine. You just don't want to do anything that's going to make an off flavor on your food. Then we're going to put the tray rack back in. You want your orange heat pads to be on the top side of where the tray goes in. So this way, make sure there's no slack in that cord. We're going to slide it right back in there. We're going to put this lip back on here. This is your door gasket. We should be ready to go now. So let's put our trays in. These are stainless steel, and I actually throw mine in the dishwasher. They work totally fine. You're not gonna hurt them. They're stainless steel. They come clean every time in the dishwasher. And if you wanna make your life a little easier with cleaning, you can get pre-cut parchment from www.freezedryingsupplies.com, as well as these nifty dividers that'll really help you make portions when you're freeze drying. And if you wanna be able to stack the trays, we sell tray stackers as well. These are locking, so they don't fall off like a lot of the competition. You can also use these for pre-freezing your food before you go into the freeze dryer. And if you wanna know more about pre-freezing, make sure you check out some of my other videos, or you can visit our Facebook or MeWe groups. All right, the first thing I'm gonna hook up is going to be our vacuum hose. This is going to go on this little nipple on the side of the machine. It just needs to be hand tight. You don't need to wrench this thing on here. It has an O-ring in there that will do all of the work for you. The other end of this is going to go on the top of your vacuum pump. We'll do that in a second, but I wanna show you how to hook up the drain hose and the power cord. On the back of the machine, you will find an outlet that will receive this end of the power cord. You're gonna plug that in. This other outlet that you see is going to be for your vacuum pump. They've made it very simple now to not get these confused. They used to be a little bit more confusing, but it's super cut and dry now. And then your drain hose will be on this side of the machine. Sometimes they're a little tricky to find, but they like to tuck them in there, so you just pull it out. You'll find it tucked inside of this little hole right here on the left side of the machine. And it looks like they're starting to use a new drain valve. That is awesome news. That's actually news to me because these were a little bit troublesome in the past. So it looks like this is a nicer quality. It looks like it might even be stainless steel. Your drain hose is going to go onto this barbed thing right here, and it will fall down below. And you want that to be down below the machine so the water that melts after your freeze drying cycle is over can go down into a container. Last thing we need to do is open this vacuum pump box. This is going to come with the vacuum pump oil that you need. They usually ship them empty, so make sure that you read the instructions, fill it to the proper amount. What I always do is go halfway up the sight glass in the front. Filling it is super easy. You actually just need to twist this demister off. This demister helps separate water and oil. I would recommend using just a little filler. It's not totally necessary because this opening is pretty big. And then you're just gonna pour the oil directly into here. Make sure that your valve at the bottom is actually closed, or you could have a mess on your hands. And as you're filling this, you're gonna wanna watch the level of this sight glass in the front. You're ideally gonna want this to be halfway in between minimum and maximum. You don't want it any more than that. You don't want the oil to be hot while you're doing this. You don't want the pump to be running when you're judging how much oil to put in. And then once you're at the right level, we're just gonna screw this demister back on. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get this to thread. One thing that I've learned, if you screw it counterclockwise to let the threads line up, then you can actually feel it when it starts to catch, and then screw it down. Hand tight. Now we're gonna hook up the other end of this vacuum hose. And then our other end of this vacuum hose is going to screw onto this fitting right here. Again, just hand tight, that's all you need it. Make sure that your ballast, which is this little valve right here, make sure that is in the O position for open. You're gonna want the ballast to be open at all times. Make sure the switch on the back of the pump is turned to the on position, which is going to be the line. The other end of this cord is actually going to go into the back of the freeze dryer in this slot right here, and then the freeze dryer itself is going to get plugged into a wall outlet, a regular old wall outlet. And now that we're all set up, I think we are ready to run a quick load. You can modify your system name so you can choose any name you want to name your freeze dryer. It's very self-explanatory. So right off the bat, this is actually a little bit different than my last one. This is asking what pump I have. Premier oil pump, reset pump hours, no. To get started, you're gonna wanna be on this home screen. We're gonna refer to this as the home screen. This is always gonna be kind of your default screen. But before we go any further, you wanna make sure that your valve on the side of your freeze dryer is in the closed position. Right now, it's in the open position. Your closed position is always going to be against the angle of the valve and the hose. And before we go into the first cycle, I want to show you a screen. If you hit this leaf right here, this will take you to your functional testing screen. If you ever need to test anything, individual components, this is where you're going to do this. But we can click done for now. And then we're just going to click start. And this is going to say cooling your vacuum chamber. You want to wait 15 minutes before we load any kind of food, whether or not you're pre-freezing or not pre-freezing. And then we want to make sure that our door is also closed and latched shut. And you can check to see how long this has been freezing in this corner. You can see mine's been freezing for 32 minutes, but after that 15 minutes is expired, it will go to this next screen that says load trays into the freeze dryer, and it will also remind you to close the drain valve in case you forgot at this point. And during the initial freeze, the machine's actually not under vacuum, so you can just open up this door. At this time, we would take our food that's either pre-frozen or not frozen that's in the trays. We're going to load all of the trays into the freeze dryer. You're going to close the door, click continue. It's going to take you to this next screen which says freezing. It will stay in this freezing screen for quite a while. Don't be surprised if you see temperatures go down into the -20, -30 range. And then the freeze dryer is going to go into vacuum freezing. At that point, you will hear the vacuum pump turn on and the pressure will start to go down in this chamber, and you'll be able to tell that by this MT reading right here. You can see it says over 2,500, but at some point it will start to drop. You'll also notice that this door gasket around here is going to be sucked into the chamber, and this bead right here will start to get fatter as there is more vacuum pressure in that chamber. And this is when a lot of people start to get worried or confused because they think that they're going to have to change some settings or keep an eye on this. The algorithm of this software is pretty intelligent, and it will know just between a combination of sensors and just different things when to go into the next part of the cycle, which is the drying cycle. That next screen will look like this. It's going to say drying. It will tell you how long it has been drying, and then it will also tell you in this right hand corner how long your total cycle is. The MT, you can see the Millitor, that is the vacuum measurement inside the chamber. It's also going to tell you the temperature of the chamber. During the drying cycle, these orange heat pads that are on the top of the trays right now will turn on while at the same time being under a vacuum, and that's actually when the freeze drying process begins. The combination of the heat pads turning on, these orange heat pads, while being under a vacuum, it will actually turn this water that's in the food into a vapor, which will stick to the side of the chamber, which takes the water out of the food and gives you a freeze-dried product that's good for many, 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 many years. And with a combination of the algorithm of the software and some sensors and things that are beyond my freeze-drying brain capability, the machine's gonna know when the food is ready to be done. At this time, you will be given 4 options. Warm trays at the top. I personally never use this one. No defrost, more dry time, defrost. And before you press any of those buttons, you're gonna want to release the vacuum, which means you're gonna turn your valve back to that straight position. Once the vacuum is released, the door will open and you can take out your freeze-dried food. It's very important at this point to make sure that your freeze-dried food is completely freeze-dried, otherwise it's not gonna store properly. To do that, the best way I have found is using your eyeballs and your hands. Just look at it, touch it, break it in half, especially on thick spots. See if you can feel any moisture or see any moisture, or even frozen spots. You want this to be dry as a bone, completely dry. And the other thing that you can do to make sure, for sure, that you are completely done is weigh this when it comes out the first time. Then you can actually add more dry time on one of the selection. Run it for a couple hours, 3 hours or whatever, weigh it again. If there is no change in weight, you're good to go. So if there was a change in weight, I would probably repeat that process until there is no change. If you need to add more dry time, you just click on more dry time, and that will prompt you to do most of the same steps that you did on the first part of the cycle. You can adjust the time if you do so. You can adjust that extra dry time with this up or down arrow here. And when you have determined that your food is fully freeze dried, you have two choices. You can either do defrost or you can do no defrost. If you press defrost, it will actually use the heat pads in the chamber to defrost the ice that has built up on the side of the chamber much quicker. If you circulate air around that with a fan or something, it will defrost quite a bit faster. No defrost will actually just defrost using the room temperature and just the natural defrost of the ice in the chamber. And whichever defrost you choose to do, just make sure you have a container that your drain hose can drain into. I hope today's video was helpful. I hope it was useful to you. I hope it answered many of your questions. And if it was helpful, let us know by giving us a thumbs up. Make sure you take some time to subscribe to Live Life Simple. This is what we do on this channel, freeze drying. So more than likely, we can help you answer all of your freeze drying questions, as well as give you some recipes and some helpful tips. And in the meantime, remember to live life simple and happy freeze drying.